At 1:14 on the early morning of 8 November 2025, the southern Ukraine radar display was torn open. A sea-skimming echo streaked along the surface, holding an altitude under 50 meters, sliding directly into the Odesa and Mykolaiv corridor. As the filter layers tightened, the true shape appeared instantly. A seamless cruise missile wave pressing straight into the outer kill box, inside the C-2 bunker. Patriot and NASAMS snapped into firing posture. From that moment, Ukraine had less than 1 minute to break the thrust. If they were slow, the night would become the moment the Black Sea opened a door for Russian cruise missiles to strike straight into the infrastructure spine. By late 2025, Russia's long-range rhythm leaned heavily on sea-launched Caliber, and Kochi 101 runs from 200 to 300 kilometers offshore. Flying at 20 to 40 meters, these cruise missiles slipped beneath most coastal radar bands, turning the Black Sea axis into a pressure corridor where even a single wave of 10 to 15 missiles could cripple power grids and rear C-2 faster than any ground push. Ukraine knew the rule: if a wave slipped the shore, the damage would outrun any response. So they built a sensor dome for one purpose, only to stop a low-altitude mass strike from the sea. Ukraine didn't wait for the cruise missiles to reach land. The Odesa and Mykolaiv front was divided into overlapping outer middle-inner kill boxes, rising from sea level up to 150-200 meters. Low-frequency radar covered the 200-kilometer offshore zone, while IRST and UAVs tracked every climb above 8,100 meters and every small course correction inland. Once the wave appeared, those map lines became a closed cage, sealing the only approach Russia could use. When the wave entered the outer kill box, southern Ukraine's radar no longer showed sky, only a solid block of returns. Within a few sweeps, scattered dots fused into a continuous 40 to 50 kilometer echo band, pressed at 30 to 40 meters above the sea like a metal beam driving toward shore. It was no longer a series of targets, it was a single assault mass. C-2 cut it apart immediately. The operations officer switched to forced clustering, letting the tracking algorithm carve the wave into segments. Missiles sharing speed, angle, and remaining distance were grouped into clusters of 4 to 6. On the command display, the Black Sea corridor split into pressure tiers, the first cluster reaching shore in 60 to 70 seconds, the next under 120, the rest queued behind at full speed and low altitude. The sensor dome tightened all at once. Low-frequency radar framed their positions. IRST pinned the heat signatures of each cluster onto that frame. Separating cruise missiles from sea clutter, reconnaissance UAVs added oblique angles, confirming formation and altitude. C-2 no longer saw a blind wall, but the spine of the wave, which cluster would strike where, in how many seconds, and what damage it would cause if it slipped through. The Patriot batteries in the middle kill box received orders first. Their fire control computers lit up with a finalized target board cluster list. Firing sequence, cut timing, at over 70 kilometers offshore. The 2 lead clusters went red, carrying a single line of text, T60, 60 seconds. If they slipped through, it wouldn't simply be 2 impacts, it would be the kind of breach that unravels a region's power grid, blinds command nodes, and hands Russia the momentum it had been chasing for months. A single minute stood between containment and a strategic collapse. The firing order went down without ceremony. Engage Group 01, engage Group 02. 2 PAC-3 missiles kicked free of their launchers, rose sharply, then snapped downward 2 hard lines cutting straight into the cruise wall. They pushed far beyond sub-Mach cruise speed and locked onto the cluster cores in seconds. On radar, their tracks didn't arc, they drove forward like 2 impact lines, closing kilometers with every sweep, and behind them hung a simple truth: if these 2 cuts missed, the wave would open a hole in Ukraine's grid no interceptor could patch in time. Impact occurred in silence. The first cluster did not explode cleanly. It simply collapsed. Its echo warped, turned into a dense smear of noise, then shattered into scattered dots before dropping off the display. The second cluster was cut down a few seconds later. Its entire subtree of tracks vanished in a single refresh. The wave's leading layer was peeled away as if someone had chopped off the top edge of a wall, leaving two clear voids in the signal band more like chipped corners than a broken assault. When C2 requested a full reconstruction, the picture that came back was no longer comfortable. Behind the two erased clusters, the wave body remained solid. Rear clusters surged forward to fill the gaps, keeping their density, keeping their 800 to 850 kilometers per hour speed, keeping their sea-skimming altitude. The holes the PAC-3 had punched were sealed within 2 to 3 sweeps, geometrically. The cruise wall had barely diminished. The Patriot ammunition load board flashed in a corner like a verdict, with the current firing tempo and the number of clusters remaining. A simple division made it clear if Ukraine kept handling the wave as a crowd of targets to engage on arrival, the magazines would run empty before the third layer was stripped. From that moment, the target was no longer individual cruise missiles. It was the structure of the wave which Tyr had to break first, which could be ignored, which would be handed to NASAMS in the inner kill box. And just as C2 began recalculating priority, the rear clusters simultaneously rose off the sea surface. Preparing for the next approach phase, the middle kill box would no longer stand still. It was about to snap shut like a trap whose safety latch had just been pulled. The moment the wave's leading layer was pushed off its flight path by Patriot, the body behind it immediately tightened formation and crawled up to fill the gap. Within a few sweeps, the crew saw the entire signal band lift off the sea surface, each track jumping from 30 to 40 meters up to 80 to 120 meters almost simultaneously. The return that had blended into sea clutter now stood fully upright, so dense and sharp that the wave had pulled itself straight into the most sensitive part of the sensor field. IRST reacted first. When the cruise missiles were still hugging the water, their heat trail was shredded by the cold surface. At the new altitude, each engine showed up as a fixed thermal pin. Infrared data streamed into C2 in continuous bursts, matching the shape the radar was holding. Within seconds, each cluster had 3 parameters coordinates, altitude, and temperature, a trio that met the firing standard. C2 read the wave like a scheduled line on a rail board. The system tracked each cluster's path from the moment it appeared 200 to 300 kilometers offshore, stitching the initial sea-skimming segment to the current climb. Once the flight path was linked into a continuous chain, Russia's intent came into focus: one vector pulling straight for a large substation, one cutting sideways toward an arterial bridge, the last holding course for the command complex. From that second on, the wave was no longer a mass of targets coming in, but a series of collisions already booked on a schedule. The display shifted structure. The target band was torn into 6 to 8 critical clusters, each tied to a damage level and a hard deadline window. T-60, T-45, T-30 flashed beside each cluster, marking the point where they would spill out of Patriot range and drop into the distance where there is no room left to correct. Patriot was held for the clusters whose breakthrough would smash the regional grid at its core or lock the command center solid. NASAMS, Iris-T Book, and S-300 took the rest, but not on an engage-what-you-meet basis. Each battery was assigned a precise task: which cluster to stop, the altitude it would appear at, and how many seconds of firing window remained. There was no room for guesswork. The middle kill box was reconfigured into a steel clamp. The 80 to 120 meter altitude boundary became the trigger threshold. Any cruise missile rising into that band was instantly tagged authorized for destruction. The clusters stepped across that line in turn at 800 to 850 kilometers per hour, with only 5 to 7 kilometers between the leading and trailing groups, meaning a 2-second delay would cause the next window to overlap and jam the entire intercept cycle. Once most of the wave had climbed and dropped into the overlap zone of radar, IRST, and Patriot firing arcs, C2 achieved what it had waited for from the start. The wave's trajectory was locked. From here, each cluster would fall exactly into the slot the system had calculated, one erased at 50 kilometers, one driven down at 35 kilometers, one deliberately allowed through for NASAMS to intercept at 20 kilometers. No more randomness. No more probing. The script for the rest of the wave was already written in parameters, and Ukraine was the side that wrote it. Those parameters are updated continuously, forcing the watch crews to stay clamped onto the display every second. Once C2 hard-locked the wave's trajectory, the battle rhythm shifted instantly. The T-60, T-45, T-30 counters dropped straight down with each sweep. The lead clusters plunged into the 50 to 60 kilometer range, exactly where Patriot was authorized to fire its second salvo. The operations map needed no hints which target was locking onto the power station, which was driving straight for C2, which was aiming for the arterial bridge. All had been marked red long before. C2's next order stabbed straight into the Patriot line Group 03 fire, Group 04 fire. No delay, no consultation, only fire. Pack 3 canisters cracked open, missiles lifted off in salvos, pitched vertically, then snapped into sharp angles, driving head-on into the incoming cruise stream. On radar, the interceptor tracks shot upward like flung metal bars, closing distance in mere tens of seconds. The crew could see each impact clearly. The first cluster was erased at 55 kilometers. The second collapsed at 43 kilometers. The one locking onto the command sector was broken at 38 kilometers. Every cluster that fell was one strategic target pulled off the casualty list. After 5 to 6 more sweeps, the wave's body began to shed in slabs, no longer a continuous band. It split into segments, separated by voids wide enough for operators to spot by eye. The feeling was as if a train were being shot apart car by car as it barreled into the station. But the remainder of the wave did not stop. Surviving clusters slid down to 30 to 25 kilometers, dropping out of Patriot range and straight into the inner kill box, the zone where NASAMS, Iris-T Buk, and S-300 were locked and waiting. At this point, each battery held the exact dossier C2 had assigned cluster ID, entry altitude, distance, and remaining time window. No one had to search for targets. Every crew awaited the exact second their cluster would appear. The first cruise cluster breaching the 20 to 22 kilometer band ran head-on into a NASAMS salvo. Missiles leapt from their tubes, held a mid-altitude arc, and locked the tracks at 50 to 80 meters. Above them, Iris-T pressed down on targets trying to climb. Below, Buk cut off those attempting to terrain mask. Within half a minute, the suburban sky became a stacked interception lattice, no gaps, no escape corridors. C2 watched the new collision rhythm impacts now collapsed into the 18 to 12 kilometer window, where every stage had to be flawless. Clusters intact enough to keep formation were engaged farther out. Those already fractured pushed a few more kilometers, then blinked out. On radar, track counts dropped so fast the system had to reduce display density to avoid showing an empty board. Yet one small cluster still tried to squeeze through. 3 to 4 cruise missiles skimmed terrain below 50 meters, sliding along contours as if trying to slip into the transmission line west of Kyiv, remaining distance 15 kilometers under 1 minute of flight. As the cluster slipped through a gap between 2 NASAMS batteries, 3 other systems lit up at once, Iris-T Buk and S-300 all locked. All 3 fired almost simultaneously. 3 intercept vectors from 3 different directions speared into the cluster at superior speed. On radar, the cluster's 4 tracks converged into a single point and vanished in one sweep. No survivor track. No falling debris signature, only a perfectly clean void where the cluster should have broken through seconds later. The remaining clusters were mere tactical residue. They either disintegrated before reaching firing envelopes or wandered into dead zones C2 had assigned from the outset. Within less than a minute, the inner kill box swept clean the entire wave body, leaving the radar as empty as before the engagement. Once the final target light blinked out, C2 needed only a glance at the infrastructure status board, every major power station, command node, and strategic bridge still held online, even as the ammunition and radar heat boards stayed deep in the red. The duty officer entered a single line in the operations log, no fanfare. No commentary wave from the Black Sea direction, fully neutralized in the middle and inner kill boxes. It was not a conclusion. It was confirmation that the entire metal storm had failed to touch a single strategic target, and that Ukraine's air defense system had just spent a minute on the edge of its limits and had not broken at any tier. When the final return fell off the screen, the picture that emerged was cold as metal. The entire wave that had driven in from the Black Sea into Ukraine had not left a single strategic cut. The meticulously programmed cruise clusters, flying low to evade radar, then climbing in perfect synchrony, ended up nothing more than faint noise drifting over the sea surface. Tens of millions of USD worth of weapons, along with many hours of high-level preparation from the Russian side, evaporated in a matter of minutes of combat. Ukraine felt the weight of the night as well. Patriot and NASAMS batteries ran at extreme load. Interceptors were loaded, fired, reloaded so continuously that the reserve board dropped into the red zone. Several radars heated as if they were about to push past their endurance limits. Yet the entire power grid, command network, and critical bridges remained lit. Functioning smoothly as though no metal storm had just swept past. When the duty officer wrote the final line in the operations log, the prevailing feeling was not relief. It resembled a cold conclusion the wave had failed to pierce anything, and the waves that follow, if they choose the Black Sea route, will have to pay the same price. When the data was stitched together, the clearest takeaway wasn't how many cruise missiles went down, but that Russia's Black Sea attack model had been decoded in a single night. Every sea-skimming phase, every climb, every angle break became a parameter for Ukraine to recalibrate each layer of the kill boxes. Russia paid not only in missiles, but in the loss of a tactic whose power had relied on surprise, now downgraded to a readable pattern Ukraine could anticipate and counter. For Ukraine, the night proved one thing: their multi-layer air defense system could absorb a full, low-altitude wave from the Black Sea without a single tier breaking. From that night on, the strategic conclusion boiled down to one line: the Black Sea axis was no longer an easy attack route for Russia, but a corridor where choosing to enter meant risking an entire cruise missile wave for almost nothing.